stuck here. I guess 97 would be the last time that we weren't able to get out. What, 3 days?
So you guys basically always have to be prepared for a flood in this house.
Well, I think they flooded real bad in 52.
Well, it was down to the garden had 4 feet. The bunkhouse was 2 feet of water around it. Dad had built, okay, there's the old house that's sitting up there, don't you?
Yeah.
Dad had built a 5-foot dike around the house to keep the water out. It was in the spring of the year, so he plowed. He had an old tumble bug that he used, and he plowed
April 13th.
wherever he could find dirt that was uncovered enough to be able to use.
April 13th, 1952 was
Yeah.
the worst. That's when it started? Or that was the worst day?
No, we weren't here for the worst day. That's when Dad, well, my uncle rode down here. He had heard that
I won't sit in it.
Lonesome Lake and can't remember the people. Nelson? No, not Nelson. Yeah, Nelson's dam had gone out up at Robsart, and Lonesome Lake was at that time held a big pile of water. They don't hold water in it anymore,
That's
and
in
it
the
had washed
PFRA.
out. And that water hit,
What goes
come
to
down
Bierman's?
past Billy Bierman's, down through just south of Vidora there, you know where Billy, you went by Billy's, and hits the creek between Vidora and Console. So that water was on top of what flood water was coming down from the hills, and then over west here where you know where Gabrucks live, they've got a great big dam, and that washed out, and it all happened in conjunction with each other.
That was Rotman's at that time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
So we really got it down in this area.
And no phones at that time.
No phones. As I say, the only way we knew about it was because my uncle had been in town.
Well, and you know, what I was interested the other day when you were talking about the flood, you were saying there was a fire too.
Well, 52, it started out in this family. My sister was born on February 6th, youngest sister. Well, Mom was in the hospital for a gallbladder operation where she just about died just after that. April 13th was the flood, or when we left. It actually lasted quite a bit longer than that. August 23rd, it froze. They had a super crop and it froze it right out. It made nothing. And it was in towards the end of September when the fire, it started east of Claydon, went back down into the States, and then come back up here. Like it burnt probably 25 miles or 30 miles before they finally got it under control. They had fire trucks from Havre. They figured there was 1,000 people fighting that fire. I know my dad and Schmitz were down there with plows trying to stop it, and they hauled the coffee out of here in boilers.
Are cream cans too?
Cream cans, whatever they could put coffee in.
The women came from all over and grabbed what they could grab to make sandwiches. The lightning that year was unreal.
So is that,
Terrible lightning.
it was just a
From
lightning.
lightning.
Yeah. But other than that, I don't know what, I've lived here since 1949.
What are some of the things that you try to carry on, and what are some of the things that you've seen change?
The change has been drastic as far as the farming. I can remember my dad having that old John Deere out there and no cab in the environments, and today we sit there and watch all the environment hit the glass and turn the knob to where we're comfortable.
And I think people are more conscious to conserve the soil to what they used to be. Like years ago they used to farm, well, turn everything over, make it black.
Yeah.
And make it blow so the dirty 30s there was nothing but dust.
Yeah.
Hopefully we never see that again.
Yeah.
Well, you take a look west,
We
we
just
planted
actually can see like
35,000
here.
trees out there.
All
Did
these,
you really?
all these trees. This dark green is all trees.
Oh.
there's 35,000 trees out there.
Because the dirt would come in and, like his mom talked about that it would be so bad, the dirt, and of course windows and things weren't sealed that good those years. They put wet towels and rags on the bottom of the windowsills to try to keep some of the dust out of the houses, or the dirt. It wasn't even dust. Like she said, it was nothing to wipe off an inch of dirt off your table before every meal.
You know, I think this RM, which is 36 miles by 36 miles square, has 490 people in it today. Where probably back in the early 50s even, there was 2,000 people living here. There was nothing for, like Vidora, they say had at one time up to 400 people in it.
They were the largest town between the three, between Consul, Robson, and Vidora.
That's
You go west,
amazing.
Senate and Governorlock. Senate has absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
All there is a sign for Senate. Governorlock, they still have the community hall.
That's it,
And-
yeah.
So what happened? Why did the population go? Do you? It's just
A lot of people couldn't stand the environment,
Couldn't make a living.
too
couldn't
tough.
make a living.
Couldn't make a living. No power.
I
no
remember
electricity.
in '49 when we
water.
come here, Dad going out with what was a one-way at that time. One-way the Russian thistles out and taking an old horse dump rake and raking them into piles. And
Like the old house always sat right where this house is. This is where his folks always lived. And like his mother had no way of keeping anything cold. So they had an ice house out back where the feed stacks are. That's where she went to take her milk, her butter, her cream. How many trips in a day did she make? She has no idea. Hundreds of them.
we got ice down at the CPR pump house. There was a pump house just a mile down the creek where they pumped the water up to the railroad track for the steamers. One of those big high water towers. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of those or not. That
It used to be Supreme.
was a mile east of here. There was a station called Supreme. And there was a dam on the creek to back up the water. It probably was 5 feet high, the dam. And that's
Weird
where
type.
him and Schmitz used to go down there and cut ice,
And from the
load it on the
creek up to Supreme would have been what, a mile and a half?
mile.
And water was pumped through
A wooden
a wooden
pipe. The
culvert
trench
or
was
pipe or
6 feet deep and it was all dug by hand. Like in 1913, there was no such thing as a
round culverts or
steel culverts or
pipes or
backhoes or drag lines or anything to dig it. They dug her all by hand.
Do you think, has the community changed in that, the population's changed, but when you were describing how people helped out with the fire? Like, is
I
the
think they
community,
still are the
that sort
same.
of value
Oh,
is
yes,
still
I
there
think
though,
they're still
Yes,
no matter how
it's
many
still
people
If you're
are
in
there.
trouble, they are there to help you in any way. I think anybody in this community will give their shirt to you if you needed it.
It's nice to
And
know.
I think so.
Even if there's less people, there's still that value.
It's still there.
It's still there, yeah.
We maybe depend on each other more than we used to in a lot of ways.
Like sharing work, or even, maybe not so much work, but even a little bit of equipment here and there, or helping out with this or that. Because manpower isn't there, people don't have 5 boys at home to help out or something like that.
Well,
Makes a big difference.
Yeah.
we own a place up north the close place. You seen those, you come south of Idora?
Mhm.
There's 3 granaries and a set of corrals, 4
On the
miles
west
south,
on the west
west
side.
side. That was owned by the closest, and if you looked up on top of the hill, there's an old house
Oh, that's
sitting on
the
top of the house, or the hill. That was built in 1909.
Wow.
There was a family by the name of Closest that moved up from South Dakota. They drove their steamer all the way from South Dakota up here. And they built that house, and it was a very unique in a way. They built an oval window in it. And
facing north.
looking north, and when you came over the hills, you could
From
see
Maple
that
Creek.
light. They always kept a
A lantern.
lantern or
something there.
something in that window at night. It burnt all night.
Oh,
It
lead
was,
you way home.
yep.
Yeah.
Well,
I
it was
guess-
very dry back in the 30s, and they just didn't have
Yeah.
the water to grow,
Water,
eh?
isn't it?
Even back
They didn't have
till the
dams
lake.
and-
Lake was
Deadlines.
built up north. Battle Creek would go dry in the summertime. It-
And we've seen it dry.
We've seen it dry. 5 years ago. The last time it was totally dry, and it never started running until November that year. Like
Make
How's the
that
water,
out and-
drinking water around here?
we haul it.
We have to haul it from Consol, yeah.
There's an artesian well at Consol that we haul from. Like Kevin's place, Reamer's place, all of those have deep wells.
Except in the coulee there by Bevan and Carrots. That isn't a deep well.
That's a freak of nature.
Yeah, just
You can
not
put a
coulee.
pump on that, inch-and-a-half pump, and pump 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it will never lower, and it will never go dry. The PF over here, I don't know, they spent thousands of dollars.
Oh my gosh.
And like, they went right around the place and punched holes. They were bound, they turned, finally gave up and they dug a deep well. We never could afford it. When Watson's dug theirs back, cost $40,000 then.
Damn, yeah.
So,
It's a long
81.
time.
81.
81. So they put the deep pump there, the pumping for the deep well. In 81.
And Watson's, they ended up getting under government. The government come in and wanted to punch a hole to see what the Judith River water was like. And we had a community meeting, and there was us and Schmitz and Funks, Reamers, Chapmans, and Watsons, I guess, in this area. And we had a meeting and decided that Watson's
Who
probably
would
needed,
get this well? Who would get a chance
needed
at
it
this
worse
well?
than anybody.
Like here we had the creek, at least cattle could drink out of the creek. But they were hauling for cattle and everything, so I think that was mainly why they had chosen me.
I worked for a
230.
seismograph
I didn't
outfit,
notice that. Deep,
and
if I'm understanding that
Yes.
correctly, 230 you say?
1,000 feet,
to get water
Yeah.
is 1,000 feet.
1,000 feet.
This hole, the last hole we drilled, cost us, well, originally cost us $11,000, but they got the casing out, so it saved us $4,000. But that's a $7,000 post hole. When I worked on the seismograph, we'd come in here one Sunday afternoon, and we punched 4 or 5 holes, 150 feet deep, and there was nothing, all dry.
In 67, it flooded bad enough, we were totally surrounded by water here. It took the bridge out. It took both ends out. First it
67,
it took the north end out, and then the water was high enough, finally it took the south end out. Here the bridge was sitting in the middle, and couldn't get to it from either end. When the water finally went down, you guys laid planks across it, we walked the planks.
Water was, it stayed high.
It stayed
for
high.
so long.
Well, I think it was 3 months we didn't cross the creek there. We had to either go
I
by
can
trolley
remember
car or walk the plank like you say.
Dad taking the team of horses across the creek and literally swimming. I can remember him taking the team trying and pulling the John Deere tractor across so he could seed. Everything to the east here used to be farmed, eh? And he pulled the John Deere tractor and seeder across with the horses because the water was so high that he couldn't drive it across.
And what were your parents' names? We should ask that for the record.
Steve and Mary.
Steve and Mary. Their full names?
Steve Tittle and Mary Tittle. Mary Ann Tittle,
Mary
actually.
Ann? Yeah. What was her maiden name?
Mesmer.
Mesmer.
She was raised about 11, 12 miles west of here.
I can remember her talking about in the winter going down the stone boat and filling barrels full of water, and by the time you got back to the house they either froze or you dumped them over or something like that.
Jeez.
Like she was from a big family of 9 of them. So just imagine hauling water for your whole household. They drank it and everything too.
We were different here because Battle Creek by fall would be running, so we always had lots of water. And when we moved to this place, the fella that owned it had put a cistern in and a pump in the house so we could
Oh, wow.
pump the water up with a little old fact
One like that's out
out there in front.
Out there in front had that water barrel and that barrel.
That was in the house. As I say, and that was in 49 when we moved here. That was pretty modern.
Mm-hmm.
So in the fall, Dad would always, once the creek froze over, he'd always fill the cistern, and just before spring runoff, he'd fill the cistern so we'd have drinking water for the summer and winter. Go down and chop ice, bring it up and put it on in the boiler on the stove overnight so Mom could wash clothes the next morning.
But then things did get better after your folks, like most people put in 32 volt power plants. And everybody had their own little bit of power. Then finally the power come in, and oh boy.
How many babies do you have? Children?
Our own,
Yeah, your own.
Kevin and Marla.
There's the
There's-
grandkids.
There's Marla and
Oh,
her husband and the grandkids.
This is Kevin and Stacy.
This one's Kevin and Steve.
Aw.
They live just over the hill.
right.
And they got no kids. No, the winters aren't what they used to be. The snow used to be, I can remember when we first moved here, there wasn't the road there, but even if there would have been a road, it had been covered up with snow. The snow was so deep, the ice would jam up and have big ice jams and stuff. Now we never get any runoff. You know, the creek never gets high, where
Yeah.
when we first moved
I think
here,
there's too many dams and dugouts along,
every spring it was a
Coulees.
ritual for the creek to be high.
which is
Sure.
good. Everybody needs the
52
dams.
was an extreme, but it, like
Because you guys-
67 and 86, that was a normal in the spring of the year. So I've got irrigated land 20 miles west of here. If you come straight south of Council, instead of turning and going east or west, you keep going south, you'll go through the middle of my irrigation.
And which plot is that?
Nashland.
It's the
irrigation,
Nashland?
Yeah. You can see the Nashland Reservoir when you're coming south of Council when it's full. You can see the trees and dam bank now, but you can't see any water in it right now. It's pretty well empty.
Because you've had a lot to do with irrigation politically.
I think my dad started irrigating in 53. He bought or rented the plot we've got, and then in 67 he bought it. So we've been involved in irrigation a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And I got involved politically, I guess you'd say, when I got nominated to the Council National Irrigation Board, and then I became chairman. From there, I got nominated to a steering committee, which would be, 15 years ago, to set up the Saskatchewan Irrigation Projects Association. And then I spent 3 years as the first chairman of the Saskatchewan Irrigation Projects Association.
But you're still a member of
I'm
that,
still a
you're still
board
an
member,
active member.
active board member, till December of this year, and then I have to go off. I've been off 1 year in that time because you could only spend 2 consecutive terms, and then you had to spend at least 1 year off.
And would you like to join back up after that, or you?
I hope not. I hope I can talk somebody into stepping into my position. I've had enough arguing with politicians, and,
You've done your share of bidding.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've probably spent I know I've spent 25 years involved in the political side of the boards, and
Mm-hmm.
But you never get too much water in this country, or water reservoirs or whatever.
I
Or maybe
was-
all Saskatchewan, I'm not sure.
I was the one that worked in the late 70s and early 80s to get the Battle Creek Reservoir built, which political will decided that we didn't need.
Where would it have gone?
It had been about 1.5 miles off the US border.
Oh, so that far south.
Yeah. It was to store water to make up for the deficit when we created a deficit up at Cypress Lake. It was actually a balancing reservoir is what it would have been,
Make sure the Americans get enough?
to make sure
Yeah,
the
'cause
Americans
this is an
got
international water stream of Battle Creek.
their share.
They have to have a share.
Yeah, 50%.
They have to have a share.
On a year like this, we probably would have it full now, because I'm sure we've accessed water. The
But
creek
you don't
is-
get credited for excess right now.
We never get a credit for excess. We can always go into debt, but we can never go into excess.
So the idea is that when it's a dry year, we can use more and put it back in from the lower one.
It was, as I say, very good idea. It was the government that was in power at the time, they actually were ready to let the contract out. Everything was done. We'd bypassed our environmental studies. It took a lot of work to get past that. And they were ready to let the contract out when the election was, and we changed governments and
Back to square one again.
back to square one. It hasn't died. We've had several water conferences over the last 4 years in Regina and different places, and the Battle Creek Reservoir is talked about at all those conferences. I guess because I don't let it die is one of the reasons. But they did some studies, and the fella that did the studies fully recommended that any place there could be water stored, there should be something done about it.
Pretty straightforward.
We control one of the most precious commodities there is, and the most fresh water in the world in Saskatchewan. It's unbelievable, and yet we're doing nothing about it.
Well, whoever thought even 10 years ago of everybody buying water? You know, you see people running around bottled water. You can look at it, but nowadays, that's just a common deal. You know,
And most people have water coolers, I notice, in their
Yeah.
homes around
Yeah.
here.
a lot of them do,
We
yeah.
still got faith in the old Flowing
Yeah.
Well.
You don't have a cooler yet, but tea,
So
coffee.
you get it from town for free?
From the artesian
from,
well?
From the
Yes.
artesian well, yes.
That's a lucky thing to have there, isn't it?
It's very, I would like to have 1 penny for every gallon of water that has gone out of that well since it was drilled.
Well, there's actually 2 wells.
There's 2 wells side by side, but it's still.
Is that why Consul's there, because of the artesian wells, or did they find it after?
Actually, Council don't have the artesian
No,
wells.
they don't. They're not affected by it, I don't think.
They've got
I don't know
wells
why
that are about
Council is there.
230 feet deep. They've got lots of water, but it's not from the same stream as those wells.
But the artesian wells are on Consul land, or are they on somebody else's
No,
land?
actually, it's not. It's on Daryl McGregor's land.
Oh,
It's
is
a mile east of console.
Wow.
Scott Sanderson has got wells, but they're not artesian. You don't hit the artesian again until you get back down to Elaine Earls, and then down through Gabruck's, and about a mile from Gabruck's buildings where it runs out again. And we have tried to find it, but we can't find
See,
it.
that same flow must go through where Scotty Brown is.
Scotty Brown. It's a very peaceful place to live.